Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to today's conversation. And I am delighted, I'm Sara Jane, just in case anybody hadn't guessed, and I'm delighted to be with my co-host, Enolia, and with our guest, Leslie Rowans. Leslie, thank you so much for agreeing to join us this evening, this evening because it is for me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's a real pleasure. And Enolia, welcome. Can you hear me, Enolia? Oh, have we lost you? Ah, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to carry on, but I am going to try sticking a note to Enolia. Oh, okay. We'll see. Can you hear me, Enolia? Okay. All right. She's gone. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize. This is just technology for you. Enolia will rejoin us. The topic for our program this evening is trauma. What is it? Have you been affected by it? And I think with all three of us, when Enolia rejoins us, we absolutely, I think there are very, very few people in this world who can honestly say they haven't been affected by some form of trauma. But maybe the thing we should really talk about for me is, well, what is trauma? Because for me, trauma is very different for everybody. You know, it's not a set. Hello, can we got you, Enolia?
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. So yes, we now have all three of us. Excellent. I've just introduced that we're going to be talking about trauma. And it's also, what is trauma? Because trauma is different for each and every one. What's traumatic to a child may not be to an adult. So I think, you know, I'm going to actually come to Leslie first, because I know this is a real passion of yours, sort of trauma. So, you know, do you want to sort of start, you know, with your thoughts on what trauma is?
Yes. And I am very passionate about this topic. And, you know, particularly with everything that's going on in the world, we all are facing trauma. And what I'd like to say is that I've kind of, during some of my research, I've learned that we have what's called big traumas, a big T, little traumas, a little t. And what do I mean by big traumas? So I think we begin to kind of define what those are. It might, you know, help our audience to just kind of relate or resonate. So when I say a big trauma, it's a frightening, disturbing, often life-threatening event. It can happen all at once, or it can happen multiple times to us. And so some of the common forms, if you will, of, and I don't want to minimize this, but really a common form of what we call a big T trauma would be physical abuse or sexual abuse, domestic violence, natural disaster, war, death or loss of a child or a loved one, a mass shooting could be a big T. Witnessing a big T, like if someone else, you see or you witness something that's happening that's tragic or horrific, that's not in your control. And a good example of that, as we've seen here in the United States, is, you know, the murder of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, or any of those people who have suffered due to police violence. And pandemic is, you know, a large societal type of big T, a big trauma. And when we look at the little traumas, and we've all had them, but we may not necessarily know or related to being traumatized in some way. those are often kind of prolonged events that happen in our life, or they can happen repeatedly. And they're commonly, I would say, dismissed. Our family, our friends, but we call these little traumas, and they could include things like emotional abuse, any type of developmental trauma, which occurs in childhood, childhood neglect, even a divorce. Maybe you were betrayed, maybe someone cheated on you, or you rejected at some point in your life, or being shamed. Again, a death or loss of a loved one, including a pet. Chronic stress and feeling overwhelmed. I remember as a child, I was bullied. Now, of course, my parents, protected me, or they did all that they could to protect me, but still, I was being bullied, I was being harassed. Experiencing a pandemic. For some of us, we're handling it well, and for other of us, we aren't. So those are just kind of the way that I kind of differentiate, if we will, if we wanted to kind of categorize them. And I don't mean to minimize anyone's experience of trauma, but that kind of, helps us to put things into their proper perspective.
Yeah. Enolia.
Yeah, I'm sitting here listening to this, and it brings me back to the same definition that I would have for fear. Because when I think about fear, I think about a bubble. And when my ego's engaged, this is my routine, this is where I'm comfortable, this is how things are supposed to go today, this is where I'm supposed to define everything. And as long as it doesn't surpass those boundaries, everything's great. And, when I'm usually talking about this, I always make it akin to the heart's desire, because the heart's desire always wants to push past those boundaries. But when we're not comfortable and we go past those boundaries, that's where fear comes into play. So I kind of look at the fear and the trauma is that it is outside of my comfort level. It is outside of what my expectations are looking for, want, or invite into my life. And, I'm on defense. I'm totally trying to figure out, even though we have this thought of control, and it can be a facsimile, whatever you want to call it, but we hope to be able to at least control our world to a degree, self-control, if nothing else. I feel out of control even for self-control. So with that, yeah, I make it akin to fear and trauma going hand in hand.
And, I agree with you too, especially in childhood trauma. And let's just take a look at that for a minute, because I oftentimes, being raised by our parents or our caregivers, oftentimes we don't necessarily associate having any trauma due to our parents, of course, because say our parents love us, they care for us, they, protect us, but oftentimes that's not the case. And then when we look at, being raised in an environment where there's drama or fear, right? Our bodies assimilate to that. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily know how or why of what's happening, but it's become normalized for us. And I think that when we look at healing from any traumatic experience, we need to actually look back into our childhood, to see where something may have started. And it could be because over time, we were talking about the big T's and the little T's. So if we just take, for example, the little T's, the little traumas, over time, one little trauma can add up, and eventually it overwhelms us in our ability to really cope with that little trauma. And as these traumas increase, over time, it affects how we manage our lives. So think about our parents and how they raised us. And oftentimes, we say, well, my mom or my dad did the best that they could for me, right? We were fed, we had a roof over our heads, we were raised, either in a religious family, but underneath, it could have been some of those little traumas that were, affecting us in negative ways. So fear is definitely one of those things. We may have lived in fear all of our childhood. And then, of course, when we move into adulthood, we have, situations that could occur that cause us then to feel anxious or, overwhelming stress.
Yes.
Oh, and you said it, because I was going to say about it's about, for me, because I feel the traumas, the main traumas that occurred to me were as a child. And without going into great depth, being scolded as a baby, that then resulted in 3 months in hospital. At a time when a little one so desperately needed their parents, the circumstances meant that I saw them once a week for an hour.
Yeah.
And they know now the emotional damage that does to children. That is a trauma. That actually is an abuse. They understand that now, but they didn't at the time. But then there can be little things that compound on top of that may appear not a lot to an adult. Oh, come on, it doesn't matter that we've moved, that you didn't come home to familiar surroundings. It doesn't matter that your mother was pregnant with your sister, who then actually died at 9 weeks old. Oh, you were only 18 months old. That wouldn't have affected you at all. But on top of feeling rejected by parents, there comes the rejection of a sibling. And then there's the little thing of a nickname. And that nickname for me was Pickle Puss. Well, we also have, we use in England is, oh, that is picklish. Oh, you are being a pickle. But that means sort of naughty. And when it is initially said with laughter, because you've made your parents, your caregivers laugh, you think, oh, that's good. It's all right to be myself. Then you start getting into trouble. And suddenly you feel you're being told it is not okay to be you. And so if you become the way I did, was I became a people pleaser, because all of this happened to me. And that is why it is a passion for me to sort of support people. As you said, it's go back. Where did these things start for people? It's
go ahead.
The child.
So I'm sitting here listening to the stories of Sara Jane, and it just brings me back to my childhood too, and those moments. And for me, it was a lot of bullying and teasing. So my birthday being on Halloween, oh, when are you going to take off the mask? When are you going to fly away? When are you going to blah, 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 the teasing and the bullying, because I was a late developer. So, here I was, this, small little girl, and the girls around me in New York City and Queens were big girls. And I was there at a time when kids were getting busted. We were getting busted. And so just the day-to-day, getting through the day without, people fighting around you, and then why are they fighting? Because you're different. Well, why are we categorized as different? Well, you're being bussed into a neighborhood that doesn't want you. for integration, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, all of those things shape our lives, shape who we are. We find the little girl or the big girl that gets through the situation, that moves through them, but the memory impact is significant. And therein lies the trauma.
Yeah. You know, I've been doing some more research too with a psychotherapist, David Roshi, Richo, and he identifies, that everyone comes into the world seeking, right? And that we're seeking really the 5 basic needs that from parents or caregivers. And the first one is attention. So you come into the world, you don't have a vocabulary, and crying is really our only way to communicate our needs, whether we're hungry or our diapers need to be changed or we need to be held. And another one is affection. And maybe, our parents weren't that affectionate with us, a hug, a kiss, but our brains are, they're not fully developed until, of course, after we're born. And even up until, I believe it's like age 21, 22 years old, our brains are continuing to develop. And so affection, physical attention, the cuddling, being held by our parents helps our brain to develop. And then another one that he mentions is just appreciation, from babies to a toddler, and then, as little kids, our personalities, are beginning to emerge, and we need our parents and caregivers to accept us just as we are, and not try to change us or mold us into, definitely, of course, guide us, but that we allow us to be who we are. And then, just allowing. This really comes about as we talk about our independence. First, we're so dependent on our parents and our caregivers for everything. And then we learn to crawl, and then we learn to walk, and then we're off to school, and then we may years later move out. Well, our parents and our caregivers, they should welcome that and encourage our transitions, but oftentimes that's not the case. And so when we think about those 5, basic needs and whether or not they were met for you as an individual is something I think allows us to begin to really talk about when we go into our childhood. Can you see or, think about in a time when maybe mom, dad, or caregiver wasn't so affectionate, wasn't so attentive, and what reason that may have been. And then this also kind of leads into going down another rabbit hole as well. What did our parents experience when they were growing up, right? Mm-hmm. Because when we talk about, and this is also a passion of mine as well too, when we talk about ancestral healing, it really is looking back even further. What did our parents experience? Granted, we live in different times, different things are happening in the world, but what are our parents being taught, or our grandparents? And, so when we look at beginning to heal from traumas, it really is a matter of taking a look at our ancestral paths and then coming forward and acknowledging what that is for us and how we were raised by our parents. And I say oftentimes, especially to my clients, we want to get to a point where we have compassion, right, for maybe what our parents may have experienced as part of that process of your own or my own healing.
Enolia.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about it from so many different ways, because the spiritual aspect of that ancestral, which is what resonated with me the most, is that a lot of people accept it. And they just go, oh, well, and I'll use something very generic. My great-grandmother had headaches, migraines. My grandmother had migraines. My mother had migraines. So I'm going to have migraines. No, you don't. No, you don't have to. You know, how we look at what passes down from generation to generation is we're so accepting of the burdens.
Yeah.
And like, I know with some of my clients, I'm like, okay, we need to release the burdens and accept the gifts. So let's take a look at what your ancestors had that were positive versus the burdens that they went through. And let's release those burdens and say, it stops with you right here, right now. It stops with me right here, right now. It's not going any further. I am not passing this on to my children. And okay, what do I have to do? Where do I have to go? How do I have to face this in order to resolve it? To resolve it. Because I don't have to have these headaches if I take care of my body right and I do the homework and do the research and see where it's deficient, because a headache and a migraine is saying, the body's just basically saying, I'm deficient. Bring me back into balance. How do I need to be back into balance? And I look at that in every respect. So emotionally, you know, if I'm stuck and I'm spinning and I'm spinning and I'm spinning and I'm spinning, what is it that I need to release to come back into balance? And am I willing to release that? And, you know, because we love to stay stuck, and especially when it comes to memory.
Yeah.
And, you know, I grab onto my spirituality because the first thing is that I'm living right here and right now, and 5 seconds ago is gone. And 10 seconds ago, and a day ago, and a week ago. So why would I embrace the memory of something so ugly to remain stuck in that space?
Yeah. And I'm so glad, Enolia, you brought that up, because I think the road to recovery, at least from, you know, my training, can look like it can be different for everyone. So,
Yes.
for example, I'm going to just share with you some of the tools that I use as a holistic practitioner to kind of help guide my clients down that road to recovery. Because as you say, you can just be on this perpetual, you know, ongoing, and then it gets passed down to your children and your children's children. We often probably overuse this about meditation. But one of the things about meditation is it's an opportunity for you to go inward, quiet, you know, the chatter. And I know for a lot of people, the meditation starts out, you know, especially if you haven't practiced it, it can be difficult. But if you stick with it, right, becomes a practice, a daily practice. It allows you that opportunity to kind of listen to that, your inner voice, right? What is it that I want, that I need? And sometimes, like you said, in spiritual aspects, allows you to kind of receive those messages, right? You're taking care of you. Also, going through the grieving process, and there is a grieving process to healing trauma, because especially if it was from childhood, you know, we're grieving the fact that our parents didn't protect us, or stand up for us, or they didn't take care of us in the way that we should have been cared for. And so the reality is that no one escapes childhood without some type of wounds, right? Mm-hmm. And when they're left unhealed, we can carry them into, you know, our adulthood, and again, pass down to our children. And this is why there is a process, and I talk about this on my website as well too. As a holistic healer and practitioner, we're there to help guide you on your road to recovery and to healing. And it is a process. It's not going to happen right away. Whatever happened to you in your past, or maybe it's a current event and you were traumatized by it, it's going to take time. And so we need to be patient enough to allow the process to happen. And then lastly, what I do with my clients is help them with reflection. So if we just take for a few minutes, just reflect on our childhood and just consider the memories that immediately come up in your mind Were you feeling sad or angry or anxious or anything that seemed painful? And there's no need to stay here, in this kind of field that long. But your mission, or our mission really, is to really seek out what are those blocks. Okay. And you just might want to take some notes down, because when we become aware, again, some of us are walking around having unhealed traumas and not even really aware of them. So it's, again, part of the process is to reflect. And just pay attention to, write down what your impressions were while you were reflecting. And I love this sage wisdom from a woman. Her name is Laura Claims. And she said that if we can't talk about problems, we can't see them. And if we can't see them, then we can't solve them. So I encourage anyone who's listening, if you resonate or you have experienced any type of trauma, either from your childhood or from in your adult life, seek out a trusted ally, someone who can support you on that road to recovery, so that you don't continue, as Enolia said, living in this perpetual, fear, or living a life that's no vitality. If you suffer from depression, or post-traumatic stress is also another one of those unhealed traumas that we if we don't balance those concerns in our bodies, they will overwhelm us and they will consume us as well.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned about, sort of parents, because to me, this is when I work with people, but it was also understanding that in my own life. There are times, and children do not understand this saying, things outside their parents' control. Because to children, everything is black and white. It really is. It's your parents make a promise that you're going to do something at the weekend. But the car breaks down, or something else occurs that is outside the parents' control. That is not the parents saying they don't love you, you're not getting it, because it is circumstances.
Yes.
Circumstances as a child for me, it was the rules of the hospital every other day for an hour. The reality with mum not driving, there only being one car in the family, because this was 62 years ago, and so they could, and because of the distance to the hospital, they could only get there once a week at the weekend, and they were still only allowed to stay for an hour. That was not because my parents chose to do that. What age do we get to before we suddenly start understanding circumstances outside of our control, of other people's control? And that is a really important one for me in the understanding. And it's also, we were talking about parents, hugs and cuddles. How tactile were your parents? But of course, how tactile were their parents? So if they grew up in a family that didn't give hugs, kisses and cuddles, then they are not going to know how to do that. And therefore, you are not receiving the things that you really require. Going back to my own family, both my parents were only children. My dad's mum died when he was 5. So his stepmom was just that, a woman married for convenience so that there was somebody to care for my dad. Mm-hmm. My mother's father was, he worked for a company called Cable and Wireless. So it was all to do with communications. So he was stationed in Malta and Gibraltar during the war. So the Second World War, my grandfather was not around for my mother at all. Mm-hmm. So both my parents in a strange way, lost a parent. And therefore, their upbringings were very different. And yes, their whole attitude was to try and do as much as they could for their children. But then, a horrible accident to the eldest daughter, child that dies, mum lost alternate children. These are all things that they went through. And it is that understanding of what has gone on that can help us to heal our child.
Yeah.
For me, I feel it is really important that the adult, we don't have to like it. We really don't have to like it. And there are circumstances that a child that's been abused, how many generations down the line was that abuse throughout the generations? And that becomes the norm.
Yeah.
We don't have to condone it. It's about understanding what it was all about so that we can let go of it. And as you've both said, it stops with us.
Yeah.
It does not move the next generation down.
Yeah. And I want to even go a step further, because it is, I always make this akin to being in the movie and observing the movie. Okay. Yeah. So we have to learn to be observers sometimes.
Yeah.
It is just as important, whether you're a child or an adult, to recognize that someone's been in trauma. And that what you're dealing with, maybe not the face of that person, but the face of the trauma. Because I remember, as you were talking, Sara Jane, I remember being like 8, 10 years old and waking up in the middle of the night and every light on in the house. My mother was a nurse, so she worked midnight to 7 shift. And my father used to watch me. And I would wake up and every single light would be on in the house except in my bedroom. And, the TV would be loud, and I'd come out and I'd peek out and I'm like, hey, Dad, what's going on? Why is every light in the house? And he's just like, oh, I'm okay. And I'm like, no, you don't seem okay. And he's like, oh, I just had a dream. Well, what was your dream about? Tell me. And what it was at the time, it wasn't recognized that he had PTSD, because my father fought in World War II. Okay, he was born in 1919, had me very late in life with my mom. And so I remember being 8, 9, 10 years old, and he told me the stories. And I know that gave him relief. I know. Because I sat there and I watched him. He was just trying to decide, well, should I talk to this child or not? And I pushed him. It was just like, you need to tell me, because you have every light on in the house. I want to know what's going on. What's going on with you? Why are you, sitting like this? Why are you feeling this way? Push. And then and I understood him. And then the compassion came later, because I really understood the stories of what was troubling his heart most of the time.
Yes.
Visions that he couldn't take he just couldn't get them out of his head because of the war. And it has helped me to work with vets. It has helped me to respect it so much more, because people hear, oh, I've been through trauma, but they don't understand sometimes what that trauma is. And that recognition and understanding, and then implementing the patience, compassion, and not taking everything personally really, really, really plays a huge role on that person's healing journey.
Yeah.
And even if it's not their healing journey, so that they don't turn around and pass it on to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
So these moments are really, really, really significant. What's your take on it, Leslie?
I definitely agree. I also believe for myself, I think about this now, and I'll say 55 years old in July. I thought I had a pretty great childhood, right? Until I really started doing some reflection. And I realized that I was brought up in a very Christian religious faith, some of my traumas was happening right in my church, my spiritual community. And I didn't want to acknowledge that because you go to a place of worship, right? That's supposed to be a place where, you know, you get guidance and you're loved and you should be protected. But it was the messages that were coming back to me that were serving as traumatic experiences for me. And I just thought, well, that can't be. So, for example, there was one time I remember there was a family that needed help and support in the church, and we were raising money. We used to cook catfish dinners, and we would raise money, right, to help support the families and things like that. I can't remember exactly what happened to the family, and but my family, we did what we could to help support. But the pastor of the church at the time was using words like, well, if you don't give, it's a sin. Or if you don't help to support, it's a sin. You're sinning. And I thought to myself, well, then I don't want to do that. So I'm going to, give or do whatever we can, even though our families were doing that. But I'm thinking about those messages, right? And how they help to inform me. And then, of course, there's also a thing around shame as well, too. Like if we don't do something, right, we're going to fall away from the grace of God, or something like that. And so I'm just saying that even in our spiritual communities and how we were raised in our, environments, sometimes those have things too that we internalize that could not necessarily be thought of as traumatic, but they really are,
I couldn't agree more. Don't get me wrong. Religion has its place.
Yes.
But I was raised Catholic. And so it was, sort of loving, caring, forgiving God. But if you get married in a Catholic church to a Catholic and then divorce and want to remarry, you are going to hell. But you can kill. I could have killed my first husband, and I would have been forgiven for it. But and slowly, but then obviously, yes, as you said, there were many other inconsistencies in what was being preached. And once I read the book Conversations with God, and I was still, I had spells of not going to church, but at this point in time, I was back at church. And I was listening to the sermon, and I was thinking, oh, you've got it. You've got it. And the one last comment would be, oh, you've lost it. And I thought, what am I doing to myself? Still going. And so I stopped going. Do I believe in a creator, in Jesus, in Mary? Yes, I do. But I believe in so much more as well.
Yes.
Do I affiliate now with any religion? No, I don't. But it doesn't mean that I'm not a good person.
That's right.
And I think this is it. And I am very happy. There were some beautiful people at that church I was going to. There really were. And they actually, one of them came to me one time and said, Sarah, will you be an ecumenical minister? And I looked at her and I said, I can't. And she said, okay. The following week she came to me and said, why can't you? Curiosity got the better of her. I said, married to a Catholic in a Catholic church, divorced, remarried, and separated from my second husband. She said, you're right, you can't. She said, and don't tell the priest. Okay, fine. But there were some really beautiful people there. And so I honor and respect that that was their choice. But it became no longer my choice, which is a shame in some respects because there were some really beautiful people there. But we do have to be, it's just like, what am I putting myself through when I don't believe this anymore? Not to the extent of what's being preached.
Yeah.
So, yes, I don't.
And that there's nothing wrong with you. There's
Exactly.
absolutely nothing wrong with you.
Exactly. Our Creator loves every single one of us.
Yes.
We are born perfect.
Yes. And whole. Yes.
Absolutely. There is nothing wrong with us at all. But it is that control from other people that are trying to guide us that can be, but that doesn't feel right to me. We know better. We're the adults. And we do have to unlearn an awful lot of what we've been taught to get back to who we are. And that is all part and parcel of healing the traumas.
Mm-hmm.
And not being judgmental. You know, it was that one word can be traumatic to a child. And I really mean that, because I really felt that the using of that word pickle with me when they started telling me off, when it was part of my nickname, was really that they were just telling me it was not okay to be me, period. That hurt.
Yes.
On top of everything else. It would have been bad enough without the rest of it, but on top of. So it's never about saying to somebody, oh, but come on, that can't have been traumatic. We have no idea what else was going on at the time in somebody's life.
Yeah.
That could turn something that could appear minor into something. And to me, it takes it from being a little t to being a big T because of everything else.
Yeah,
which is interesting, because this is why we call it doing our work.
It's an inside job.
It's an inside job, and it's an inside out job. And, you know, these are the reasons why we have these conversations. You have to really step back and make a choice, a personal inward choice that says, I'm going to let this go. It is no longer going to consume me, my life, how I see things in life, how I act and expand my life. Because some people are very secluded and have very limited places that they go and things that they do because of the trauma and the fear. You know, the healing journey of stopping spinning. And when I say spinning, I mean circling that trauma so much that you either let it all consume you and it eats away at you, your physical being, your physical health and everything. And you can literally die if you don't choose to step out of the dark. And that doing our work is the commitment and the promise that we are going to move through the story and stop allowing it to consume us.
Exactly.
And so what it takes and the confidence that you have to have and the strength that you have to have and summoning that power deep, deep, deep from within to find a strength that says, even if I take baby steps, I choose to take a step.
Yeah.
And I choose to honor me, and I choose to view me as I see me, regardless of anyone's perception, judgment, or otherwise stated. And just really getting the help that I need to hold my hand if that's what I need to step through this process to ultimate goal and promise and purpose, move through the story.
Yeah.
Move through that story.
That's so good. Yeah, I totally feel you on that, Enolia. You know, something else that comes up for me too that we don't necessarily talk about in terms of traumatic experiences, and that is societal trauma, right? That we're pressure every day, right? And that could even be things like, you know, you're working at a job and you're in a business meeting or something, and your boss, you know, berates you or something like that in the meeting. Or again, it's what things that we're seeing and what's happening today in our world, the deaths, the killings, you know, just the disparities in healthcare and access to healthcare. Where am I going to get, you know, in the United States, vaccines and that kind of thing? It seems to be getting a little bit better as we're moving through this, where people can access, but the underlying part of not having adequate food sources or access to healthcare or the basic, excuse me, the basic things that we need, all of these are real traumas that happen for us every day. And when we talk about, of course, how we heal through these traumas that are happening to us every day, because it's not like, okay, this happened to us today and tomorrow, you know, something else doesn't happen to us. You know what I'm saying? But how do we then navigate through the waters of that when it's a consistent thing that's happening to us from everywhere? It's coming at us from everywhere. So yes, we talk about the childhood traumas, things that happen to us from our parents, our grandparents and things like that. And then we talk about everyday, you know, things that happen to us as well. But what do we do terms of trauma and healing when it's happening to us all around us every day, from the environment changes, you know, just our lack of green space that's happening. All of those things are considered traumas, but we don't look at it that way. So how do we begin to heal our world, right? That's not to be cliche-ish or anything like that, but how do we begin to heal our world so that we as individuals are more resilient to anything that could happen to us? Not saying that we're not going to have our own responses in our own way, but how then do we become more secure, more solid, more resilient, right? When everyday traumas are happening all around us in society, not individually behind the closet, all that, everything that's happening. So I think that's worth discussing as well too, because we have a lot of folks out there like, I don't know how to, you know, how to handle this, how to deal with it, who to talk to. Will anybody understand what I am going through? It may seem minor to you, you know, Sara Jane, you know, those little minor ones are, you know, but it is still, it can become a big trauma and it's overwhelming. So having a discussion of where do we go? What do we do? And I think, Enolia, you said doing the inner work so that we are much more resilient. We can handle, or in some way can balance ourselves, right? Internally, so that we can withstand whatever it is that we face.
And I want to comment on that just a little bit too, because I'm sitting here thinking of the fact that there are points, you know, at home in the US where I felt really overwhelmed with all of the fighting and everything going on. But, you know, it's like hitting your head up against the wall. If you're hitting your head up against the wall every day, stop it. Stop it. Right? So I really had to take stock of what constituted me hitting my head up against the wall. Listening to the news was like hitting my head up against the wall. Turn it off.
Turn it off.
Turn it off. I turned it off, and, you know, I was with a partner and I was like, I care about you. I love you, but you may not turn that on while in my presence. When I'm gone, out to the store, catch up on your news and everything else. While I'm home, I don't want to hear it. Turn it off. I meant turn the television off, because the commercials, all of it. I physically was feeling ill. I turn the radio off. Okay? We are the makers of our world. And there is nothing that doesn't say that your home can't be sacred, can't be your sacred space.
That's right.
Outside of the walls of your home, yes. But inside the walls of your home is your space. Inside the walls of your room is your space. And you have a right to basically say, this is how I want my space to flourish or not.
Yeah.
And if it has to get down to that, because see, what happens is that when you turn it off, then you gather strength. When you turn it off, then you gather the confidence and the strength, because you're not feeling under attack. And then when you go out, you have that much more strength to be able to deal with society in the ways that you have to deal with society. And then you can come back and then you can recharge and re-nurture and regain. So, I don't know if you want to add to this or not, but I was sitting there, I'm really thinking about this because, it's real. It's very, very real.
It is real. I've been on a bad news diet for years. I mean, absolutely years. I do not listen to the news. Occasionally, because obviously I share the house, we have separate rooms. He watches the television where he does, but he watches it in the kitchen. So if I walk into the kitchen, he's got the news on because he chooses to watch it. I find out enough of what's going on in the world. Being on the internet, I don't go looking for it, but it's there in your face. But it doesn't mean that I have to have the news on, because I don't. Neither of us, we don't have newspapers. It is not there in our face. Therefore, on the whole, I can live in peace and out of fear, because the news is not only negative, it is about creating fear.
Yeah.
And when we free ourselves of that cause of fear, but it is about what we choose. We are the only person that can heal us.
Yeah.
There are many people out there who can support you with that. But it is up to each of us to do what is right for us. It is our responsibility to take care of us. And I think this is one of the big things. It's, if I get ill, if I overeat, if I do this, if I do that, if I get diabetes, I will be taken care of. Why don't we start saying, hang on a second, no, it is your responsibility. You are the only one who can heal you. I cannot take your trauma away. I can support you to let it go. It is up to each one of us to take care of every aspect of our life, of our health, of our well-being. And if we choose to watch the news and be bombarded by the negativity, then that is our choice. If that is what each and every person chooses, but if you think, well, actually, no, listening to the news, just as you were saying, Enolia, switch it off. Allow that peace. Don't be made so afraid. And you can live in much greater peace with yourself. And the greater peace you live with yourself, you bring greater peace out into the world.
I want to make it akin to Nelson Mandela when he said, no one can lock me up. I have freedom all the time. So, the reading and the expanding of your mind and the choices that you make on how to expand your mind.
Getting out in nature, right? Yeah. Just appreciating go stand out in the rain. It's okay. Your hair will be okay. Just go out and experience, right? The world, the beautiful world. If you can't think of anything, I'm going to add on that social media is part of that as well too, because that there I think can add. We tear each other down on it. It's a way of communicating, but we tear each other down. That's part of that whole negativity and fear and things like that and what people post. Take a break. Take some time away from it and get out in nature. Read, right? Listen to music. There's lots of things you can do other than, those things.
Yes, all of it. Absolutely.
All of the above and a lot more.
And a lot more.
Well, we've been going for the better part of an hour, ladies, yes. And I'm not surprised because this is, and I know we have got some folks watching. So if you've got any comments, anything you'd like to ask, please do it right now because we are going to bring this to a close. But obviously, if you've got anything, then we would really love to be able to answer that or comment on that for you. So feel free to do that. And if you're watching the video, the replay, then please don't hesitate to get in touch if you would like to. If you're watching the video on YouTube, you will find the links to all of us underneath in the information below. So please don't hesitate. If there's somebody you want to contact, you can through our websites. So please do feel free to do that. Thank you so much, both of you. And this is a bit of a passion, I think, for all of us in our own unique way, because that's what we do. We help people, we support people.
Yes, we do.
So thank you, Leslie, for joining us, because I know it's a real passion for you too. But literally just before we finish, have either of you or both of you got just one final little thing that you'd like to add before we close?
Leslie. Go ahead, Leslie. Yeah.
And thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here with you both. And the message that I would send to anyone who's watching is self-love is so important to your well-being. So take time away from family and things that could be causing you a lot of stress and being overwhelmed. Love, just self-love practices. It could be anything, but it's so important that we take care of ourselves. It's time for healing. And the only way to do that is to love yourself. Love yourself even more than you thought you possibly could.
Yeah. Yeah, you're worthy of all the love you give to others.
You are worthy of everything. You are worthy of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sara Jane, why don't you go ahead and then I can finish up.
Well, I think we are absolutely worthy of all the love, the caring, the support that we give to others. And when we give it to ourselves, we can actually bring so much more to others. And I think this is one of the things back to religion is just and with a lot of people's upbringing, especially for women, is you're not taught that it is okay to love you. It is essential to love you.
Yes.
And you will be happier, you will be more fulfilled, and you can support others to become exactly the same. And so it is really, really important. So that is the final thing I want to say on that. Just very briefly, because I am then going to pass finally over to Enolia. Gift of Healing TV, Wednesday, the 5th of May. Energy Healing for the Masses, a new paradigm with Niall Gerard. So if you feel like joining us for that one, and there'll be a demonstration in that as well. But that's just our weekly programs that go on Gift of Healing TV. Sorry, thank you about that. Thank you for letting me do that. Enolia.
And the last thing that I would say is that you have the self-care, as Leslie said, and everything that Sara Jane said also. What I want to add to it is that you are not alone. that if you need help and assistance and you don't know where to get started, you are not alone. Reach out, ask someone to help. We have Sara Jane, we have Leslie, we have myself, all professionals. Find someone you relate to, find someone you resonate with, find someone and get through it.
Yes.
You are worth it. And on that note, I just want to say a special thank you. Thank you, Leslie, for joining us. A special thank you to Sara Jane, always. I love that you share from your hearts. We appreciate you. You are courageous and wonderful and phenomenal in all that you do. And so what I'd like to also share is that on our today's conversation will be Friday, May 14th. And at let me make sure I have this correct. UK time, it is 8:30 a.m.
No,
have
5 p.m.
No, she's out of Australia.
Oh, right.
We have Stefania Paleo. And Stefania Paleo will be discussing signs you are dating a toxic woman, how to know she is poisonous for your life, because she runs a beautiful, beautiful room called Gentlemen's.
Enolia, we've lost you. Do you want to repeat that? We lost your audio.
Oh, okay. We are going to be speaking with Stefania Paleo, and she runs a beautiful program called Gentlemen's Square. And Gentlemen's Square gives tips and assistance to men and their relationships. And so we will be discussing signs you are dating a toxic woman, how to know that she is poisonous in your
Lost you again.
Oops. Can you hear me?
We keep losing your audio, but we've got the gist of what's happening.
Okay. So please join us next time, May 14th, on today's conversation with Stefania Paleo. Gentlemen's Square. Yes.
Thank you, folks. It's been an absolute pleasure. See you again soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.